At 3:14 a.m., a U.S. destroyer in the southern Red Sea faced a choice that a naval doctrine seeks to avoid. 14 inbound threats were converging on the ship. Its air defense magazine had 11 interceptor rounds left. Before the first missile entered range, the commanding officer faced the core dilemma. With limited interceptors, he needed to decide which threats to address and which, by necessity, to let through. The AEGIS display updated slowly. 7 small radar signals appeared at 262 degrees, 68 nautical miles out. They moved at 160 knots. These were one-way attack drones, likely Shahed airframes. They flew low and seemed slow enough to handle, but there were too many to ignore. The watch officer logged the contact, ran the threat assessment protocol, and called the commanding officer. He reached the bridge in 70 seconds, already knowing the only number that mattered. Every watch, every morning brief, and every talk with his operational action officer over the past 3 days echoed that number. 11 interceptor rounds in the vertical launch cells are suitable for air defense. 7 tracks were on the screen. The number would soon rise. The number would not stay 7. The destroyer had spent 41 days on duty in the southern Red Sea. In that time, it dealt with 22 Houthi threats. These included one-way drones, anti-ship cruise missiles, and the anti-ship ballistic missiles introduced by the Houthis in late 2024. The ballistic missiles mattered. They arrived faster and dropped at steeper angles. They left less time to react to errors. The ship requested resupply 6 days ago. The request was acknowledged. Reload ship, 4 days out. 4 days. That number was in every morning's brief since. On paper, the campaign math was simple. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer leaves port with a set number of missiles. These include a mix of offensive weapons, air defense interceptors, and ballistic missile defense rounds. The exact mix can change, but the main limit stays the same. Once those missiles are used, the ship cannot reload them during a Red Sea patrol, at least not yet, and not as quickly as this campaign needed. This turns every engagement into a race against time. The Houthis understood the pressure. Their mixed attacks, cheap drones, then faster cruise and ballistic missiles didn't have to overwhelm AEGIS at once. AEGIS can sort, rank, and engage many targets, but repeated attacks wear down defenses. Every cheap drone that forces an expensive missile limits the ship's options for the next attack. The commanding officer understood this. Every surface warfare officer watching the campaign did. Cost differences, magazine limits, and repeated attacks are strategic realities that are usually left to the staff level. At 3:14 a.m., it entered his Combat Information Center. At 3:19 a.m., 7 contacts became 9. 2 new tracks appeared on a different axis, 241 degrees, lower altitude, faster, sea skimming profile. AEGIS updated in real time. 2 anti-ship cruise missiles, terminal guidance, range 54 nautical miles. At 3:21 a.m., 4 more appeared from the first axis, more drones. There were now 13 inbound tracks. At 3:22 a.m., the 14th appeared. Bearing 278, high altitude, ballistic trajectory, descending. AEGIS snapped to the track, assigning the classification code every tactical action officer dreads in mixed salvos. 1 anti-ship ballistic missile, 2 cruise missiles, and 11 drones. 14 contacts, 3 axes, same time on target. The commanding officer looked at the track picture, then at the magazine count in the corner of the display. 11 rounds left. The tactical action officer was already working on intercept solutions. The engagement plan followed a set order: ballistic threats first, then cruise missiles, then drones. This order makes sense when the ship has enough missiles for every type of threat. It becomes much tougher when it does not. If left on standard priority, the system would use the ship's remaining missiles in order of threat. It would make quick decisions, and maybe even the most logical ones. But if the attack pattern changed or the system used too many missiles early, the ship could end up with no options left for the final threats. Manual assignment. We do this one by one, the commanding officer said. His operational action officer looked at him. Manual assignment. We do this one by one. That order slowed the system, so a human had to take control again. The burden shifted to him. This moment was missing from public doctrine. Planners warned of empty magazines, slow reloads, and expensive interceptors used against cheap threats. These appeared in briefings and war games. But warnings rarely became real solutions for officers making choices in live attacks. Doctrine could eventually close this gap. New guidance could standardize how to rank mixed salvo threats when ammunition is insufficient for all targets. Flexible manual engagement rules, not just automated hazard rankings, would help when resources are low. Regular, controlled, risk-taking training can prepare crews ahead of crises. Plans should assign which defensive layers address leftover threats. Doctrine should also address logistics. This includes flexible resupply plans, forward arming and refueling options, and earlier support requests as magazines run low. Yet none of this helps a commanding officer at 3 a.m. with fewer missiles than threats on the screen. Doctrine said, focus on the most dangerous threats. It did not say what to do when prioritizing all of them is impossible. He had 4 minutes to act before the ballistic missile entered the window. The first 6 shots were almost forced. 2 for the ballistic missile never risked single-shotting a maneuvering threat. 2 for each cruise missile either could cripple the ship if missed. 6 rounds allocated. 5 remaining. 11 drones are still inbound. Some drones could be left for the 5-inch gun. It works well against exposed targets within a few nautical miles, but struggles against small, fast drones. Others might be disrupted by electronic warfare or decoys, but this method is unpredictable. It can confuse some drones, but it does not guarantee success. Some threats might reach the CIWS zone. The ship's phalanx system fires bursts of 20mm rounds at close range. This is a strong last line of defense, but it works best against single threats. It is less reliable against groups of drones, with little warning if it fails. Each defensive layer has its risks and limits. None offers the distance, certainty, or safety of a missile intercept. The real decision was now clear. With too few missiles for the number of threats, the captain had to weigh in real time which dangers to trust to other defensive layers and which to intercept at range, accepting risk either way. This was the heart of the dilemma. 5 interceptors targeted the 5 drones nearest the radar faces, VLS, and bridged the ship's most critical areas. That left 6 drones without assigned missiles. 6 weapons are still flying. 6 threats the commanding officer chose not to stop at range. He has spent 24 years learning to protect the ship. Now he sorted risk into categories, with sailors in each. He pictured the aft deck, radar arrays, exposed stations, damage control lockers, sailors below, waiting for a sound they hoped not to hear. Experts call this intercept triage. In the room, it was the captain deciding where to place the risk. He had 4 minutes. He gave the orders: ballistic missile, 2 rounds. Cruise missiles, 4 rounds. 5 drones, 1 each. The remaining 6 went down the chain: electronic warfare, guns, CIWS. This was not giving up on those 6 threats. It was harder accepting they'd be handled later, closer, with less safety, exposing more people. He picked up the intercom. All hands, brace, incoming threats. CIWS is active. Damage control teams to stations. This is not a drill. He set down the handset. He had made the plan. Now it had to hold. The engagement began at 3:27 a.m. when AEGIS fired the first interceptor pair against the ballistic missile track. The first missile scored no kill. For 3 seconds, the screen gave no clear indication. The ballistic track broke up, then reappeared. The second interceptor destroyed it at altitude. The ship survived the most dangerous threat, but the delay was a reminder. Even right choices do not always guarantee perfect results. At 3:33 a.m., the first cruise missile was destroyed at 18 nautical miles. At 3:35 a.m., the second was destroyed at 14 nautical miles. 4 more interceptors gone. The ship had now spent 6 of its 11 rounds on 3 tracks, exactly as planned. Afterward came the drones. The 5 prioritized drones were engaged in sequence between 3:37 and 3:41 a.m. 4 were destroyed by missiles. The 5th broke course after an electronic attack degraded its terminal approach, and the tactical action officer canceled the assigned missile before launch. The 5-inch gun took the shot instead. It missed wide, but the drone continued drifting off bearing and splashed harmlessly into the water. 1 interceptor had been preserved. For less than a minute, the magazine count read 1. Then one of the 6 unassigned drones altered course late and crossed into a bearing that threatened the ship's radar face. The captain released the saved round. The missile left the cell at 3:42 a.m. and destroyed the drone before it could descend into the close-in layer. Magazine remaining 0. 5 drones are still inbound. The first entered the CIWS range at 3:43 a.m. The Phalanx opened fire. 20mm rounds tore into the drone and detonated it in a bright blossom off the starboard bow. The second drone took gunfire from the 5-inch mount earlier than expected, broke apart, and fell into the sea short of the ship. 3 remained. The third entered the CIWS envelope at low and late angles. The burst caught it, but not cleanly. Its warhead detonated in the water, roughly 400 meters off the port quarter. The blast sent spray and fragments outward, but no damage reached the hull. 2 remained. The 4th drone was hit at approximately 1,100 meters. The rounds tore through the propulsion section rather than the warhead. It corkscrewed downward and struck the aft deck at a steep angle. The warhead failed to arm. The airframe disintegrated on the steel, sparking a small fire in the equipment space. No one in the room liked the 5th drone. It came in behind the debris, briefly hidden by the remains of the earlier fight. CIWS found it again and fired. The drone broke apart just outside the ship, close enough that fragments hit the deck and broke exterior fixtures. There was no major damage, but it was close enough for everyone to understand what the last layer really meant. Damage control teams extinguished the aft fire in 4 minutes. 2 sailors received burns while containing it. Neither required medevac. The ship's structural strength is intact. No major weapon system was lost. The AEGIS display cleared at 3:46 a.m. No further tracks inbound. Threat assessment. Salvo complete. The ship had held, but its air defense missile magazine had not. The mission status report transmitted to CENTCOM at 4:15 a.m. classified the engagement as a successful defensive action with minor damage and 2 non-critical casualties. The report was accurate. By every metric normally used to summarize such an event, ship afloat, mission continuing, crew alive, task force not broken, it was a success. The report could not completely capture the tactical meaning of the final magazine count. 0 usable VLS air defense interceptors. The ship still had CIWS, a 5-inch gun, electronic countermeasures, decoys, a trained crew, and a combat system ready to track new threats. But its main long-range defense, the one that lets a destroyer stop threats before they reach the ship, was gone. The ship remained present. It was no longer defended as its mission assumed. It requested priority resupply at 4:20 a.m. The logistics vessel adjusted its schedule. Rendezvous moved from 4 days to 61 hours. The destroyer continued its patrol. For 61 hours, it continued its patrol. That is the part people often miss when talking about successful intercepts. The ship won the fight, but ended up strategically weaker. If another complex attack had come the next night, the commander would not have been choosing how to use 11 missiles. He would decide whether the remaining defenses could make up for an empty magazine. When a ship is left with an empty or low magazine, commanders can consider moving to reduce exposure, changing patrol patterns to keep attackers guessing, or operating near allied ships that still have interceptors. Requests for quick reinforcement or air support can help create a layered defense while the ship waits for resupply. Sharing threat data with the task force may let other platforms take on more coverage until the ship is rearmed. In future battles, officers can use these steps to buy space and time while waiting for the magazine to be full again, instead of just taking on more risk. That is not the same ship anymore, either in tactics or in spirit. The crew would feel the difference. Every new radar track would seem different. Every alert would come with the knowledge that their best defense was already gone. The main lesson from the Red Sea campaign is not just that drones are cheap and interceptors are costly. That is true, but it is not the whole story. The bigger issue is posture. The Houthis did not have to sink a US destroyer to gain an advantage. Sinking an AEGIS warship with a trained crew is extremely hard. But pushing that ship into a depleted state, reducing its time on station, making resupply harder, and making future battles more dangerous, that is a more realistic goal. The attacker's win condition is not always a burning hull. Sometimes it is an empty magazine. Sometimes it is a ship that must remain in a contested corridor while waiting 61 hours for its defensive depth to return. Sometimes a ship leaves its patrol area to get resupplied, giving up its position without being forced out by a direct attack. Either outcome changes the map. The commanding officer understood the strategic logic. He had read the same analyses as every other senior naval officer in the area. But he had not been given a doctrine for the human side of that logic. Standing in the Combat Information Center at 3 a.m. with 14 threats coming in and only 11 missiles left, deciding which threats to stop far away and which to let get closer. Technical readiness and set procedures are important, but officers also need leadership training to help them make tough decisions under pressure. Expanding wargames and tactical exercises to include complex depletion scenarios can help commanders practice risk assessment and resource management when doctrine alone is insufficient. Investing in this kind of training supports career development and prepares leaders for decisions that cannot be scripted. The doctrine told him what mattered most. It assumed he had enough weapons to act on that ranking. When the assumption failed, the doctrine ended. The captain filled the gap with judgment. He was right that night. The fire was small, the casualties were minor, the ship held. But the plan that worked for that attack, at that time, with that crew and those exact threats, is not a doctrine. It is one person's answer to a problem that will come back with different numbers, a different situation, and the same gap in the manual. The reload vessel arrived 61 hours later. The destroyer restored its magazine and returned to full operating status. But the logistics ship that brought the reload needed an escort through the Bab el-Mandeb. The destroyer protecting it used 3 of its own interceptor missiles against drones during the trip. The vulnerability of the logistics chain was real. Every resupply mission exposes valuable support ships to the same risks as combat ships. Even one unmanned drone, if it got through, could delay delivery, damage the reload ship, or trigger an emergency affecting the whole task force. Using destroyers for escort duty reduced their presence in patrol zones and depleted the already short supply of missiles. Adversaries knew that attacking the supply route could delay or halt resupply, giving them more time to pursue their own goals. To counter these risks, planners may need to expand defenses for logistics, ships, add unmanned escorts or air cover, use deception and route changes, and speed up transfers to reduce time spent in dangerous areas such as the Bab el-Mandeb. Protecting logistics is just as important as defending frontline warships, because every part of the chain now faces the same ongoing threat. The reload arrived, the deficit moved, the clock reset. It was already running again.